Hello Year 1! Today we will learn how to build on our observational skills through scientific inquiry. We will conduct an experiment to investigate how temperature affects plant growth. Before we begin a scientific observation, there are a few things that need to be considered. We need to consider the purpose of our observation. What are we trying to learn and investigate? We need to consider our observation criteria. What specific things will we be observing? We need to consider our materials and tools. Do we have the right equipment to record our observations properly? We need to consider our observation conditions. Is the environmental conditions going to be reliable and consistent? And we need to consider our recording method. How are we going to document these observations? By preparing properly, you can ensure that your observations are accurate, meaningful, and useful for scientific inquiry. Let's dive into the considerations for our observations. Our purpose of the observation is how does temperature and light exposure affect plant growth? Our observation criteria are things like plant growth, leaf color, soil moisture, temperature, stem thickness, and there is even more things we may observe. We will utilize tools such as a thermometer, a magnifying glass, a notebook, and a camera. Our conditions for our observations are to observe the plants at the same time each day for accurate comparisons. And we need to keep each spot in their designated spots, either the sunny area or the shady area. Our recording method is to write daily observations. We should use our photos we will be taking to keep these observations. This is a quick little video showing how you might choose to pot your seeds. Remember, they also need to be watered. Once we've potted and watered our seeds, we need to prepare for our investigation. One pot gets placed in a sunny area and one pot gets placed in a shady area that is mostly completely absent of sunlight. We should measure the temperature in both locations with a thermometer. The temperature in my sunny location was 31 degrees and my shady location was 24 degrees. Our plants need to be watered daily and we need to take pictures of them daily. We will need to write daily observations to observe on how our seeds are growing. We will delve into this some more. How can we observe scientifically? Observing scientifically involves using your senses to gather information and describe what you notice accurately and in detail. We can use our sight to look at details like color, size, shape, and texture. For our task, we might say, the soil looks dark and moist. When we're using our sense of touch, we can gently feel surfaces and textures. For our observation, we could say that the soil feels damp. We can use our sense of smell to sniff for any distinctive scents. Example, for our task, the soil smells earthy and fresh. Remember, we should never touch or smell anything we're unsure about. Make sure to check with a teacher or parent if you're unsure. We can always help. Sometimes our senses need help. We will use tools like magnifying glass to be able to see tiny details on things like seeds, leaves, or bits of soil. We will use a thermometer to measure the exact temperatures of the air and soil in where we're keeping our pots. We will use a camera to take pictures to help us document our observations. Asking questions can really get us thinking like scientists when we observe. We might ask questions like, what difference did we observe between the pots in the sun and the pots in the shade? How has the plant changed since your last daily observation? Are both pots germinating at the same rate? Growing, that means. How did the temperature affect the plant's growth over time? When we're observing, we need to avoid making assumptions and make sure we say things that are just facts. We might look at this picture here and think, that plant in the sun looks happy. But that is not an accurate thing to say. We need to say things like scientists and say, the plant in the sun is starting to sprout green leaves. That is much more factual. How can we observe differences and changes over time? Let's put our lab coats on and have a go at observing like a scientist. Asking questions is key to observing. For instance, what differences can you observe between the pots in the sun and in the shade? Are both pots growing at the same rate? How has each plant changed over time? How has the temperature affected the plant's growth over time? Pause the video and have a little think about how you might answer those questions. Recording our daily observations can be quite a simple task when we know what we're doing. A little tip to make things easier for yourself: put the pots side by side to take a photo when we're comparing their growth. This makes it easier to observe similarities and differences between the pots. This is an example of how I've set out my day 7 observation. For my sunny pot, I have recorded that the soil looks dark and feels a bit damp. The thermometer shows it is 29 degrees outside. The plants are starting to become taller than the rim of the pot and have bright green leaves that are bigger than they were yesterday. For my shady pot, I have recorded that the soil looks dark and feels wet. The thermometer shows it is 22 degrees in the shaded area. The plants only have slim white stems with no leaves. Those were really good observations for each single pot. But we also need to remember to observe and compare both of them. The sunny pot shows stronger, greener growth with leaves, while the shady pot plants are pale, thin, and leafless, likely struggling due to less sunlight and a colder temperature. Writing observations can help us determine conclusions when it comes to our investigation. We can learn so much from observing. From our investigation, we have learnt that temperature and light exposure are influencing the differences in plant development. As well as needing a warmer temperature, plants need water and sunlight to thrive. When we observe carefully, we learn how to gather evidence, notice patterns, and make scientific conclusions. Observing is a foundational skill for inquiry-based learning, and it helps us think like scientists.